Thank you, everyone. So just to give you a little bit of context around Ausgrid, and it's actually it's quite similar to the ACTU story in terms of the organisation being a fantastic organisation to work for and having quite a lot of systems and processes set up. And the thing that I like about that is it is a government organisation. I think our government organisations are quite beneficial to the industry as a whole in terms of being able to set standards and ensure that we are doing things like targeting females and Indigenous staff. So just to give you a bit of context around who Ausgrid are, what I'm going to talk about is some of our development programs and how we bring people into the organisation, and also some of our diversity initiatives. People might be a little bit more familiar with the name that we previously held, which was Energy Australia. Energy Australia's network business officially changed its name on the 2nd of March 2011 when the New South Wales government sold the retail business and the brand. So now we're specifically a network business. That network's made up of more than 200 large electrical substations and about 50,000 kilometres below and above ground electrical cables. So just to give you an idea about our development programs and also about our workforce profile. So we tend to bring people into the organisation at a young age. So we bring them in through our apprenticeship programs and our graduate programs. And generally speaking, they stay there until they retire and they've got about 60 years service. So it's a very interesting workforce profile. We've got a turnover rate of less than 2%. And so quite interestingly, you can imagine with that style of, or that workforce profile, there's quite ingrained cultures within the organisation. We did have a redundancy program in the 90s, and interestingly, that made actually, that took a lot of people out of the business. So we have got a gap in that workforce profile. So we've got a whole lot of people that are over 50 and heading towards retirement. And due to the fact we had a capital works program just recently and decided that we needed to hire a whole lot of apprentices to cater for this increase in capital works program. So we've got a whole lot of people who are young and a whole lot of people who are quite old and ready to retire, and there's a bit of a gap in the middle. So we have a trade apprenticeship, which is typically a 4-year program, and we've currently got 415 apprentices at various stages of the program. We also have graduates. We've got 32 electrical graduates and 3 commercial graduates. We do also have cadets, and actually that current participation rate is actually a lot lower. Sorry about that. We've had a few people come off there. And engineering officers, which is a 5-year traineeship. So what we're currently doing is actually progressing. Some of those apprentices are going on and becoming engineering officers as well. So I'm not going to focus on the recruitment strategies because I think you've covered that really well, and I think that also is similar to our situation. We've, previously it was word of mouth, so people who worked in the organisation, 90% of people who came in through our graduate or through our apprenticeship programs heard through word of mouth, which is fantastic because people are saying, this is a great organisation to work for, you should come and work for us. But unfortunately, it also does become what one of the gentlemen used to refer to as having councilised people. The 25 best firms for women actually showed an increase in profitability by women being in senior positions. Organisations with at least 3 women in top management scored more highly on every organisational criteria. So there's that driver. There has been a link between an increase in females participating in a workforce and also increasing performance. In Australia, and also specifically in New South Wales, we've had a lot of reforms from a legislative perspective. The ASICs requiring reporting on gender on boards has pushed quite a lot of quotas around females moving into management positions. From an Ausgrid perspective, we did an engagement survey and found that our levels of engagement, when we did comparisons on a gender basis, we found that females were up to or averaging around 10% less engaged than our male counterparts, and that was at all levels of the organisation. And if you look at Gallup, their statistics show that not just engaged workforces are more productive, but engaged and gender balanced give you the best performance. So part of the reason that we're doing this, focusing on women, is because it actually improves the bottom line profitability of organisations, and it also improves the workforce culture, and you're achieving more. So some statistics, and I know that these have already been floated around, but women make up 13% of trade apprentices in New South Wales, less than 2% of automotive, engineering, construction, electro, technology trades are female. Ausgrid is slightly above that at 2.65%. We haven't focused on targeting females to come into the organisation. We've actually taken previously we have been focusing on ensuring that we have an approach where people get in based on merit, and when they are in the organisation, selection and policy and process is all around merit-based and equity. So I'm just going to talk about some of the initiatives and things that we have in place around that. So we have an equity and diversity strategy, and I'm sure a lot of organisations have that. And the objectives around that are to increase representation and retention of equal opportunity groups in Ausgrid and enable us to participate and be compliant with statutory requirements. The vision, I suppose, that long and short, is that we have a workforce that is representative of the people that we serve and our customers. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about policies. Now, I'm one of those people who, policies, I always went, never heard about them, or, would never read them or anything like that. But as I've moved through a few different organisations, one of the things that's really struck me is if you have a policy and it is actively used in the organisation for the betterment of the organisation, it is very, very effective. And the one that I'm just going to point out, I'll talk about a couple, but the one specifically for us that has been very significant in changing the culture is our merit appointment process. So as we've got this organisation that's got a lot of older people who've, brought their brother or, their nephews into the organisation, what was happening was there was a lot of things around jobs for the boys or jobs for the family. If there was a female and she was in the family, she would get the job as well. But it wasn't around merit. And in terms of our organisation and trying to change that approach, we implemented the merit appointment policy where you've got to have 3 people on a panel selecting the candidate based on set behavioural interviews, and there are certain things like qualifications checks, and there's standards based on the position descriptions. So that actually had such a significant impact when it was enforced. So previously people would say, oh yeah, we're supposed to do merit appoint, but we're just going to put Joe in that job. When a senior manager stepped up and said, no, all positions have to go through merit appointment, it was absolutely amazing, the level of grievances. There was statistically our level of grievance recordings went down, because people started to see that you had the opportunity, if you could show your performance and capability, they felt like they would be able to move ahead. So the merit appointment for a lot of females actually was enormously successful. And if I look at that now, Ausgrid is currently going through a restructure and a downsizing, which is lots and lots of fun. And we have gone from having 3 female executives on an executive of 12. Now we've actually got 3 on an executive of 7, and one of them is the chief engineer. That's quite an achievement. And so, for us, we can see, we've actually seen people go through from trade positions right through to the executive position. So the merit appointment policy, so having policies that are enforced can actually be quite useful. And the other reason that I also highlight this is because, and just talking from personal experience, things like paternity leave and a flexible workplace. So I have a family of 5, and so that I didn't actually kill my 4th and 5th child, I had to go back to work full time. And so, you know, it was one of those things I said to my husband, if I, you know, seriously, if I don't go back into the workforce, you know, we're going to be looking at murder charges. So, you know, how do we manage this? And he said, oh, that's all right, you know, you've stayed at home, or, you know, you've worked part-time with the kids and things like that. I'm happy to do that. When you get to a position where you earn more money than me, straight out, never set a girl a target, and go great. So I did that within the first year, and so he stepped up to his organisation and said, okay, well, you know, I need to be able to either work from home or work flexibly, or, you know, cut down my hours. And in actual fact, he couldn't do it. The organisation he worked for essentially said no, even though his position, if I looked at it objectively, he was in IT, you know, he was doing quality checking. How much, you know, really, he could have sat at home and done that all day. That was my assessment anyway. But so the thing is, I certainly agree with the speakers. So Fiona was very clear and said it's not about gender, it's actually about equity. And I think for myself, you know, very clearly, if there was equity in the workplace and he had the ability to stay at home or to work part-time, that would have made it so much easier for me to be much more engaged and get into the workforce much more quickly. So I'm a strong advocate for equity, not just from a gender perspective, but across the board. And I think with policies, that's a way to enforce that. So if I focus now on our Women at Work program and things that we've done in the organisation and why that's been successful. So, as I said, it started after our 2010 engagement results. We found out that women were, you know, 10% less engaged. And any group that you can identify that is less engaged, you know, the objective is to try and increase engagement, because that increases productivity and obviously results from a business perspective. So, you know, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, we've got to set up a women's network so they can all sit down and have a chat. And the thing is, I'm one of those people who says, well, what have we done previously and how did that go down? And they said, oh, well, look, we brought women in, we had these senior finance women coming in and telling the women how they can work and everything. And I suppose looked at that and went, you know what? We have so many females in this organisation. We've got women who are tradespeople, and predominantly the women were working out on sites. What was the big thing that was happening at that time? Reality TV. And so to launch our Women at Work network, I brought in this woman called Amazon. And she had been on the Biggest Loser as one of the trainers, and she was like 6 foot tall, she had tattoos. And our senior executives were senior state-based, you know, executives, and when they looked at the website, they went, oh, you know, I don't think this is appropriate. But she came in and she talked about physical and being that physical strength, giving you strength mentally as well. So it's about power. And so, you know, she gave her story, and then they did this bit of a session where the women were actually, you know, punching, and not each other, but bags and things like that. It was, without a doubt, if I look back on my career and say, you know, that was a little bit out there, it was one of the most successful initiatives we have done at Ausgrid in terms of launching it. We had started off with people saying yes, they were interested. We had over 200 applications. We had people saying from Muswellbrook they wanted to come down, and we had to write to all the supervisors and say, would we bring them in? We ended up bringing them in, had about 500 women who saw the talk and then did the empowerment. And the feedback we got from not just the women who attended that, but also the men when they went back out to those sites was unbelievable, because they said, often the females were being quite quiet, and you'd ask them to get a cup of tea or something and they'd always go and do it. So a lot of them were saying, oh no, I'm not doing that. Or not say I'm not doing that, they would actually just reply, you know, whether it was appropriate, say, oh look, you know, I don't have the time now. But rather than just comply, they felt that they had the power to actually say no when it wasn't appropriate for them. So this Women at Work, that was the launch pad. And what we were trying to achieve was a forum for women to actually feel comfortable to make contact and connect with each other. So we did this launch, and suddenly we had a network of women who then were meeting on a regular basis. And so from there we've progressed and done things over the last couple of years. So we run International Women's Day programs, and in those programs, so for example this year we did a walk, so got everyone to do a walk, and they did that with the proceeds of any sponsorship or whatever we did for that. We raised some money to do, it's like a walkathon. That was for Father Riley's Youth Off the Streets, so young women who you know, had gotten pregnant at a young age, and so we were raising money for that. But we're raising awareness about women who are in our own society. So this leads into our roundtable discussions, and at our roundtable discussions, that's where the Women's Network comes together, and you know, they talk either over we have video conferencing, but we also set these up at various sites and locations, and the women just essentially talk about what's bugging them, or we provide them with an opportunity for development. So we might do some of the development programs we've run have been around, you know, managing your career, how to have difficult conversations. So we've done that focused on, you know, what are the key issues that the women in our particular organisation have had. So we're trying to make it context relative. In doing that, it's been quite interesting, the number of, you know, women who then felt confident enough to actually talk about things like bullying and harassment. So in an organisation, and whilst, you know, I could stand up here and say, yes, it's all rosy, the reality is we do have bullying and harassment, not just for females, but we have bullying and harassment in the organisation. So if that's the case, people need to know, how do I then talk about this? Where do I go? What do I do? And these women's networks, or our roundtable discussions, have been fantastic forums for people to connect and actually learn how to do that. And the feedback we've had from that has been very good, and it's also been very helpful to help people substantiate valid cases. So other things that we do in terms of our Women at Work initiatives is that we provide support for women to go to various conferences that might provide specific, you know, for women in engineering, for example, there's a number of conferences, and also for women in trades where there's things that come up. We'll provide funding and opportunities for people to go, and then what we do is when people do that, we bring them back into that women's network and get them to talk about how that might work and apply in our organisation. One of the recent programs we've run is our Women in Trades program, and it's a work experience program, and it was based on our partnership with the Women in New South Wales Government. And so we had women come into our organisation and do a week's work experience. So what they were doing was doing wiring with light and power circuits, and constructing their own extension leads and things like that. And a little bit around, you know, getting to use and learn how to use power tools. And quite interestingly, we sent out trying to get people to actually attend this. You know, it was quite difficult. We sent out a lot of flyers, we sent out emails, trying to get people like careers advisors to get their students to, you know, to actually apply for it. And it was really quite difficult. We didn't get a lot of take up. Where we got the most take up was with some of the older people, or people who are looking at changing careers. So for us, taking that learning from November last year, we're actually going to be targeting now more mature females as well, because I think that there's an opportunity there to tap into, that market. How I tap into that is going to be a little bit difficult, but I also focus on my experience there. When I worked in academia for quite a long time, it was always really hard to get. I found it very difficult, even though I'd run the P&C, I'd run FATES with 1,000 volunteers and all those sort of things. So, and being a lecturer, they always said, no, you can't go back into corporate because you don't have corporate experience. I'm saying, seriously, I can work, I can do this. And it just takes someone to give you an opportunity to show how you can apply those skills. So I think sometimes when you take time off to be a parent, which obviously a lot of females do, there is an opportunity there for women wanting to either get into a position or into a job. So that's, I think, a little bit of an untapped market in our trades specifically. So our Women in Trades is one of the programs, and the other one is our WELL program. So I'm not sure if you're aware of the language literacy and numeracy programs available from the government, and we tied that in with our Indigenous pre-apprenticeship program, and that's been very helpful in helping not just women but all of our apprentices with their their TAFE work and that language and literacy. So if you have a look at the Women in Trades, there's our lovely poster, and I've got Tylissa on the poster there. It was in partnership with Women New South Wales, and we ended up getting 14 participants, and it was a very successful program. In terms of our Indigenous program, and this is specifically looking at all of our diversity initiatives, as I said, talking about equality, but how we get people into our apprenticeship programs. When they go and apply for the apprenticeship, we don't do quotas. So even for our Indigenous, they get in on merit. And so that's what we're looking to do. So with our pre-apprenticeship program, it's been enormously successful. So we have 8% of our apprenticeship program is Indigenous. So for the last intake, and we've consistently had around 8 to 10%. And we have a 90% retention rate on that program. And there is so much that goes into that. We have so much in terms of our buddying system, a mentoring system. We have a steering committee where they actually, agree to certain activities that they're going to do. That program of getting them in on merit, that's one of the main reasons I think it's successful, because all of the other apprentices know that they're not in there because it was a quota, they're in there because it was merit-based. However, I'm also an advocate for quotas as well, because I think sometimes you need them to break down the barriers. But for us, this has been quite successful. And based on our Women at Work week that we ran last November, we're going to start modelling a pre-apprenticeship program for women based on our Indigenous pre-apprenticeship program, because it's been so successful. So just some other little things that we do just to, that we're doing this year just around diversity and inclusion. And I'll do this based on the context that we have no money. All of our funds have been, no, can't do that, can't do that. So everything we wanted to do, we said, right, what can we do with minimal or no budget? So things like, we have established a diversity council where we have members of the executive representative on that, along with our representative groups from various diversity groups. So we run that quarterly. We've done something called the Bush to Beach program, where our Indigenous Steering Committee supported the South Narrabeen Surf Lifesaving Club. Indigenous Bush to Beach program, it developed underprivileged Aboriginal children from Brewarrina to enhance their wellbeing and self-absenteeism. And this is something that the Indigenous Steering Committee decided that they were going to do. We've produced a diversity calendar, and we've also done a Harmony Day cookbook. These are all things that you can do with little or no cost. So in closing, I think that there's a lot organisations can do in terms of policy and enforcing that, and also things on little and shoestring budgets, which help people or raise awareness around different cultures, different cultures and different ways of or different aspects of work life that I think are quite beneficial. So Tylissa is actually going to talk now, and you know that old saying, some people fear public speaking worse than death? Tylissa happens to be one of those people. So I've had to remove all razors and knives from, up here at the seating area. But so I'd encourage you to be supportive, and she's going to come up and talk to you about her career at Ausgrid and how she decided to come into this chosen career and what initiatives have made a difference to her.
Thank you.
Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on this land we meet on today. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders both past and present and extend that to all Aboriginal people here today. As you already know, my name is Tylissa Stevens and I've been working with Ausgrid now for 2.5 years. But my journey with the company began about 3 years ago when I did the Ausgrid's Indigenous Pre-Apprenticeship program. I had just finished my HSC and I knew I wanted to work in a job that was both a fulfilling career and had hands-on involvement, like carpentry. So I spoke to a few people, including a man called Danny Alinde, who at the time was the manager for Indigenous education and training at Randwick TAFE, situated in Sydney. He suggested I try an electrical trade because Ausgrid was recruiting a large number of apprentices and was about to start running their pre-apprenticeship program for Aboriginal people to help them get into their competitive industry. He also told me it would be a great opportunity to gain some hands-on experience and see if this may be a career path I was willing to take. I contacted Ausgrid and immediately started the course. It was intense and one of the biggest challenges I've had to face. There was a lot of maths and electrotechnology theory to get through, and it was hard at times, especially being the largest commitment I've made to date, but very rewarding, and I'm glad I stuck through to the end. The best part of the pre-apprenticeship program was the work experience days at Ausgrid's apprentice training facility. Everyone who did the course always looked forward to Thursdays because that's when we got to really feel the sense of our potential career would be like. During the course, we had so much support from the teachers at TAFE and the Ausgrid trainers and staff. It was something really remarkable for a lot of my peers and I because we hadn't all come from good backgrounds. So we had never really had that kind of support before. It was very overwhelming at the start, but after that it was very encouraging and it made everyone motivated to do their best and strive for a career with Ausgrid. The selection test and interview was very nerve-wracking, but I got the job done. My first year as an apprentice was great. The beginning was similar to what I did in the pre-apprenticeship course, except now I was working towards a trade qualification. I got involved in the Indigenous Steering Committee as my heritage is something that I'm very passionate about. It was also a way of supporting others coming through the pre-apprenticeship program and my theory being giving back to those in need as it was so freely given to me. I also got involved in the Women in Trades Work Experience Week last year. They put my face on posters and got me to speak to students about what it was like working in a male-dominated industry. It was interesting speaking to these girls because a lot of them hadn't considered this type of career before. In terms of culture, gender really isn't an issue for me in my organisation. It is about being able to do the job. However, sometimes gender differences are apparent, like if we're moving heavy objects, but that's when we get our crew to do a team lift. But there's also equipment provided to aid everyone in our industry to do the work safely. I am where I am because of the people who have supported me, which is why I want to give back and help others the way others have helped me. If sharing my story as an Aboriginal or a woman in general helps people to realise there are many options out there and so much potential, then that's where change starts, no matter how big or small. This is what I aim for and this is what makes me happy. Thank you.